Erik.
Hey Eric, it's Teddy and Sam from Don's Insiders. How's it going?
Hey guys, how you doing?
We're doing well. How
Great,
are you?
yeah.
Pretty good.
So, yeah, we just thought if it's all right with you, maybe we talk a little bit about kind of analytics, how you got into that, how you developed your algorithms, and then maybe going into discussing mid-major programs, their
Sure.
shots at the tournament, and then like specifically San Francisco because that's the team we cover.
Okay, yep, that's cool.
Great. Hey, Eric, Sam here. How about you just tell us a little bit about your methodology? You seem to be able to create a very popular and accurate algorithm. How did you come up with it?
It all goes back to, I was a big fan of the tournament. The reason behind why I started Haslametrics is because it was kind of, it was related to the tournament, and I think I fell in love with the tournament right around 1990. I don't know if you guys are too young for this or not, but if you remember Loyola Marymount and the whole Hank Gathers tragedy that happened, that tournament that resulted, in that 1990 tournament where UNLV won it and Loyola Marymount was in there and Duke was in there, there was so much, there were so many stories unfolding, and I think I fell in love with the tournament, so much so that I was one of those guys that kind of went up there every Monday morning after Selection Sunday to buy that USA Today so I could get the team capsules, so I could see, hey, who are the best teams, what are the matchups and things like that. Well, as the internet came to be in its infancy and then it evolved, more and more data was at our fingertips. So I started pulling some of this data down, and I started just kind of recreating the wheel of some of the other analytic stuff. We're talking 10 years ago now, and started pulling some different things together. And after a while, I kind of realized, you know what, I'm just kind of recreating the wheel. I wasn't doing anything. I was basically doing what other people told me to do, or different strategies that people had already done. And I said, would I have done it this way? And I said, no. So what I started to do is it started with spreadsheets and access databases. And I sat down and I said, how would I devise how to do this? And I drew it all together, pieced it together piece by piece, and eventually started saying, hey, I can make a website out of this. I can start networking with a lot of people. And over time, it's kind of just become, you started with one brick and you added another brick. And the next thing you know, after a while, you step back and you've kind of built a castle. And it's still a castle that's evolving to this day.
Awesome. Do you have like a background in statistics or sports analytics or something like that?
No, my background is actually in electrical engineering. That's my day job, actually. I'm an electrical engineer in the utility industry, have been for 22 years. But when I went to school, I graduated from the University of Wisconsin back in 1996. And back then, computer engineering wasn't even a thing yet. They lumped electrical and computer engineering together. And my background was more computer science. You could take something called the computer option back then, which was you would sacrifice some of your power courses and you would replace them with computer science courses. I did have a lot of background of programming back in the 80s. I really just kind of liked doing it a lot, so I kind of wanted to go that route, but I wanted an engineering degree. So I kind of got a halvesies between electrical engineering and computer science.
For now, because it's gone so much from when you said there in the 80s, now it's such a growing field, machine learning and data processing. Do you use Python or other advanced coding for your analytics now, or is it still the same kind of system you've kind of always done?
For the most part, it's remained the same. I did a lot of scripting at first, and then I kind of moved a lot of the stuff. My back end is a full server database, and what I started doing was putting all these stored procedures and functions within SQL Server to do most of the work. So I still have back scripts that run, and most of these, they run on a daily basis. They run in the early morning hours after the games are over and a lot of the stats are in. But most of it just kind of runs in the middle of the night while I'm sleeping. Everything is all there. All the heavy lifting I've done, all the programming has been done. Now it's just a matter of running the script every single day. And what I do every morning, I wake up, make sure that there's no errors, make sure that everything validates successfully. I upload a single file and off we go.
Great. Do you backtest at all? Do you check the accuracy of your picks? Do you have a system for checking them?
As far as checking against like the projections?
Yeah, like how did it turn out? How your picks turned out, if you were right on or if you were off? How much do you go back and look at and then make adjustments?
Well, what I do is I don't make so many adjustments at this point. I've kind of settled. Well, I shouldn't say that, because there have been times in the last couple of years that I have made some slight tweaks. If I come across something I think is going to be better, or if it's going to be something where I said, "Well, I think this is a mistake. I should pull this out. I have done that, but I have measured my stuff against Vegas, and it's tough. I don't think anybody in analytics is going to beat Vegas, mainly because so often Vegas hits the spread right on the nose. If they say it's going to be the spread is 7, and the game is 83-76, there's no way that you can't win that. So that's an automatic loss no matter what I do. So I have gone back, and just like most analytics folks, I am high 40s, right around 50%. But I think you got to beat 52.5% to beat Vegas or something like that. But to be honest with you, I don't know anybody who's doing that.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult. Kind of one last algorithm question, then we'll talk a little bit about USF and kind of the mid-majors overall. But how much do you look at what other ranking systems are doing, whether it be the net rankings or KenPom? Do you look at those other systems and try to adjust off them, or how do those play into your algorithm?
My algorithms are completely independent, but I do occasionally look out because I kind of want to see what my outliers are. And a great place, a guy, I don't know if you know Ken Massey. Ken Massey runs a site called MasseyRatings.com, and he has his composite rankings in there. And what he does is every Monday morning he goes and finds all these different people who provide these performance rankings, and he plugs them into a big, huge, almost spreadsheet-looking web page, and you can scroll down and see the teams where I have them ranked the highest of all the different individuals, or if I have them ranked the lowest. You can see all across all these different ranking systems. So that's pretty cool. And they do the same thing for bracketology. You may be familiar with the bracket matrix, bracketmatrix.com. Mm-hmm. My stuff is in there as well. And it's a very similar thing, except with bracketology. You can see all the different seedings of all the bracketologists and where your outliers are. So I don't really go and visit a lot of these different sites, but occasionally I'll go to Massey Ratings or I'll go to a Bracket Matrix just to kind of, look and say, hey, is most of my stuff kind of in that range? And in most cases it is, yeah.
Great. So maybe now we'll take a bit of a turn into talking about mid-majors and kind of forecasting the tournament a bit. Are there any mid-majors that really stick out to you right now as at-large contenders?
Well, when it comes to the mid-majors, first of all, we're talking mid-major conferences, and I'm assuming we're going to exclude Gonzaga in that one because, some people say, well, Gonzaga is not a mid-major. Well, they're still in a mid-major conference, the WCC. But we're not going to talk about them. We're talking, and so I think the one that everybody's talked about that's going to be there again is going to be Buffalo. Buffalo was a team before the season that they had a lot of talent. They had a lot of experience, a lot of guys coming back. And if you watch them play, they play like a power conference team. They went out there last year. They upset Arizona. They've had a lot of wins this year, big wins this year, and they've obviously one of them was San Francisco. So that's a team that I think a lot of people are riding. But I think some of the lesser teams, you want to figure out at this point who's going to be the next Loyola Chicago from last year. A couple that come to mind for me, and they're pretty highly ranked in my bracketology. They're actually at large bids right now, and one of them is Lipscomb and the other is Wofford. Both of them really good offenses. Mm-hmm. Lipscomb has a lot of experience. I think those are some teams right there that can make an impact and possibly make a Sweet 16 run this year, assuming they get in the tournament.
Yeah, that was kind of the next thing we were going to ask you about. The ASUN and the MAC, two conferences that maybe could steal some at-large bids. You've got Lipscomb and Liberty. A lot of people are thinking Liberty might take that conference tournament and then Lipscomb sneaks in as an at-large. And then in the MAC, we've seen Buffalo losing some road games. Maybe Bowling Green could sneak in, maybe Toledo as the automatic bid, and Buffalo would take an at-large. Do you think that's a likely scenario from either conference?
Neither of them is really likely because these guys, at this point, most of these smaller conferences don't have a lot of power compared to other conferences, so they end up kind of cannibalizing each other. And a loss in the MAC or a loss in something like the OVC or something like that is really damaging. Usually these teams stumble, but if you stumble in the ACC, you stumble maybe against an NC State, or you stumble against a Syracuse or something like that. If you stumble in one of those lesser conferences, say like the WCC again, if you stumble versus say a Pepperdine or something like that, that can be really damaging. So the margin for error in those smaller conferences is less. But yeah, I think there's a possibility in one of those smaller conferences you could get two bids. Another one that we didn't talk about would be the OVC, which is Murray State right there. Mm-hmm. I have Murray State being a better team right now performance-wise than Belmont.
Mm-hmm.
But Belmont has an at-large resume. We have them as an at-large play-in team right now. Now, that may not hold over time because those two are probably going to eat each other up. But at this point right now, that'd be another conference, the OVC, that would have a shot at possibly getting, 2 bids.
Yeah, and also Jacksonville State there has been playing pretty well recently.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
so kind of transitioning over to USF, what do you think the odds are that USF makes the tournament? And what do you think they need to do before March to make the WCC a 2-bid league this year?
Well, it's a very similar. Someone asked me a question from St. Mary's and I think San Francisco and St. Mary's are in very, very similar situations. And the question I got earlier from somebody was, what does St. Mary's have to do? And it's the same as San Francisco. Keep winning and keep hoping that these other bubble teams keep stumbling. And the thing is, you can't be discouraged at this point. People say, well, they're never going to make it in. Well, you got to remember the bubble is painfully mediocre. I have to remind people every single year that these teams that are in the play-in games are not very good. So you got to realize if you can go out there and play your game and just keep winning the games that you're supposed to win, you have a pretty decent shot. Now, does San Francisco have a good shot? I'd say the odds are against them right now. I have them in the field of 68 right now, but I am in the minority. So I think what's going to be a big linchpin for their success to get to the postseason is obviously going to be the game against Gonzaga. If they can beat Gonzaga, wow, that's going to be a huge boost. But if they don't beat Gonzaga, then you're talking about, okay, now you got to win the games you got to win. You got BYU still in there. And then you got the WCC tournament. You got San Diego left in the regular season slate. Those are games that have a little bit of impact. I think BYU and what was the other team I was just talking about? San Diego. Yeah, both of those are ranked in my 80s. I think one is number 80 and one is number 88. So those aren't bad teams, and those are fairly decent wins. So if you can start getting those wins, ideally you get this Gonzaga game, which is going to really, really move San Francisco up. But if they can't, it's going to get tough because some of these games are going to drag them down. Even if they win against the likes of a Santa Clara or a Portland, what happens in those games is those teams are ranked so low that they can actually sometimes work against your resume, even if you win by 30, just because of how poor that team is.
Definitely, yeah. Do you think the net rankings have a lot to do with why USF is even in the conversation? Because they had some big wins in the pre-conference slate, like a 43-point win over Maine, and other big win at Cal, that helped them in the net rankings, probably because of efficiency, whereas they would be lower down in RPI?
Yes, absolutely, and I think that's the benefit of the net. In my opinion, I think the net went in the right direction. I think the RPI really did not take into account performance. It was all wins and losses and strength of schedule of your opponent and everything like that. What they did with the net is they went towards, very much towards the efficiency and the performance rankings. Now, in my opinion, they may have gone a little bit too far. It might be too early to say at this point in the game. We're going to find out a little bit more on Saturday when they release the top 16 for the tournament. That'll be interesting because when that happens, usually a lot of bracketologists, and like myself, end up scratching their heads trying to say, well, this team got a 4 seed and I had them as a 6. And then you kind of have to go back to the drawing board and figure out why that is the case. But my early opinion of the net is it's a move in the right direction, but I think it may have gone too far in the right direction. I think they may end up having to pull it back.
Mm-hmm. And then final question here. We're just wondering, in terms of the committee, sometimes on Selection Sunday, you get some really unpredictable situations. Do you think they really are going to value the net as their main system, or do you think everyone has predicted everything wrong and we're just going to get a bunch of teams like Indiana or teams maybe worse than Indiana from power conferences making the tournament?
No, I think the net is going to be a very similar, used very similarly as what the RPI was used, and it wasn't the end all be all of we're just going to go right down the list and use it, but I think it's used as a tool, and obviously a great example of where they went away from the RPI last year was Notre Dame. Notre Dame. They definitely adjusted Notre Dame for the quote-unquote eye test because of Bonzie Colson. Now, I looked at that and thought to myself, that wasn't such a – I didn't value that move at all. Why penalize another team just because one player gets injured and they're going to be a little bit better, even though the guy missed half the season? It's not all these other teams' fault that Bonzie Colson got hurt, so why penalize them? So they're going to use it definitely as their primary tool, in my opinion, but I think they're going to take into consideration other elements. A good example being Kansas. I think Kansas's overall resume is going to shine brighter than where they're going to fall in the tournament because they're going to have to take into account the loss of Azubuike. If Azubuike was there, you're talking about Kansas being in the 1-seed conversation. Now all of a sudden he's out. They're starting to perform at a little bit of a lower level. And now I got to think they're even probably teetering on the brink. I wouldn't say they're a full-fledged 4 yet, but I think they're definitely in the 3-seed territory right now after their most recent loss.
Yeah. Look, we really appreciate you talking to us. Hopefully we'll get a chance to talk to you again sometime. It was great talking.
Yeah, great talking to you guys anytime. Let me know.
All right, thanks.
Thanks so much.
Erik.
All right, have a good one, guys.
All right, you too. Bye.